Hey everyone, this is Mike and welcome to my walkthrough for Castrum Marinum Extreme or Emerald Weapon Extreme. This is another two-part fight, so once you beat the first phase, you get a checkpoint to wipe as much as you want on the second phase without having to do the first phase again. Now, before you pull the boss, make sure you take spread positions around a marker, assign 2 players north, which should be your 2 tanks. Everybody else can spread around the east, south and west side. And also make sure that you make 4 parties of 2, 1 for north, east, south and west. The spread positions we will be using for a couple of different mechanics, mainly in the second phase, although there is one part in the first phase that we will need those for as well, whereas the groups we will only need for one mechanic. With that being said, let's get into it. So the first thing that he's gonna do is his tank buster. So you can put a shield on the tank as you pull the boss or something if you want. This will be Emerald Shot. This time around it's not gonna be a tank swap or anything like that, so just use a couple of cooldowns. And you should be fine for this one, it doesn't hurt too bad. And then after that we have Optimized Ultima. This is the raid-wide AoE, so just mitigate this a little bit. And also immediately healed people up again, because Aetroplasm production is going to be the group mechanic. So for this one we have 2 players north, 2 players south, east and west. And this will spawn all of these orbs. Now grabbing an orb will grant you either physical invulnerability up or magical vulnerability up. And because of that, it's very important that you take 2 different colors of orbs. Depending on the configuration in which these orbs spawn, you will need to rotate either clockwise or counterclockwise. Since we had our yellow orb here and another yellow over here, we need to go counterclockwise because me and my range player over here need to go grab the blue one. Now these balls hit pretty hard. So there are basically 2 ways to handle this. Either you hyper mitigate these things so that you can just run from one to the other, or you can just take the first, run middle, wait for heals, then grab the second. In our first few runs we always did the hyper mitigation thing, which would usually end up with a couple of people dead. So that's why I would recommend that you still put up some mitigation for the first hit, but then run middle, give your healers some time to put like 1 or 2 GCDs out to heal you back to full before you go and grab the second one. The second set, the one that spawned on the intercardinals, have a little bit of extra time before they explode, so you can take the time to just run middle and get some heals first. Emerald Beam, this is exactly the same as in normal mode. Emerald Weapon is just going to spin around with these 2 lasers on the front and the back. And then we also have these circle AoEs. Basically just don't stand in the AoEs for this one. Relatively simple, nothing too special about this. Following that up, we have our magnetism mechanic, Magitech Magnetism. This will spawn 3 bombs in the arena. One will be where the tanks are going to be, and where the 2 bombs are going to spawn, that is where the group is going to go. So as you can see, 1 bomb over here, 2 bombs behind him, or behind the boss. Meaning our tanks are gonna run northeast and north-south if we are taking the 1 bomb as our north position. So we have 1 tank here, 1 tank there. These 2 are always going to be the same polarity, so either double plus or double minus, meaning they're gonna push each other away once these little orbs around these bombs disappear. So this will create a big safe spot over here. These are flare markers, they will still hurt quite a bit on the tanks themselves, so use a cooldown or 2 for these. And also make sure that the whole party is healed up, because they do raid-wide damage when they explode as well, because they are flare markers. Going into our second, Magitech Magnetism, this one is going to look a little bit different, because there are more bombs this time around, but the safe spot is still going to be the same. When you look at all of these things, the only thing you have to pay attention to is 2 bombs that are linked together that have the same polarity, so again either double minus or double plus. And then those are going to be generating your safe spot right here. You can still keep melee uptime as well if you want. If you like max melee over here, you will still be safe from the explosion. Another Emerald Beam, exactly the same as before. Look at which way he's going to be spinning, and then just walk in, walk out, dodging the AoEs. Every time he does this Emerald Beam, by the way, the arena does become smaller. So if you are playing a red mage and you are on the smallest arena size possible, you do really need to be dead center or you're going to backflip off the map. It does get really tight towards the end. Another optimized ultima, so just make sure people are healed up, maybe use a little bit of mitigation to mitigate the outgoing damage. And then we go into a more obscure mechanic. So Emerald Weapon will pull all of its arms out, and this means that you all have to go inside immediately, because this does go out pretty quickly. And immediately after this we have Divide et Impera. This will put a double tank buster on, I believe, the main tank, so just stack up together for this. You can use invulns if you want, I believe, but just stack up, use some mitigation, and everybody else should spread out now to those predetermined spread positions, because everyone will also get an AoE on them. This attack will come back in the second phase, but it will look a little bit different. But you can just handle it the same, just make sure that everybody is spread out and that your tanks are stacked together. Then Emerald Weapon is going to split and leave behind the bottom half. This will come back in phase 2 as well. In phase 2 this has two different versions, but I believe phase 1 only has this version right here, where it will do Expire, which will create a point blank AoE underneath the boss, so just move out for this one. And this will also leave behind a black and red AoE marker that will expand, so just make sure that you are away from that AoE when it goes off. Then the hands are going to appear again, but this time around the hands are going to stay around for a whole lot longer. And it will basically do the same attack that it repeated before with the Expire, where you have to move away from the boss. As soon as the hands go in, you have like 1 or 2 extra GCDs that you can stay, and then the AoE will go off. And then we're going to go into another magnetism mechanic. This one is going to again layer something else on top of it, where it will target 2 players with an AoE marker, so those players need to bait their AoE away from the safe spot. So as you can see, these two are linked together with the same polarity, meaning that over here will be our safe spot. I have a marker on my head, so I'm going to bait this away from the safe spot. As you can see, these are line AoEs originating from the boss itself, and then just move into the safe spot. This is not where the enrage is going to be. Most of our team killed ourselves over here because we already had the boss at 0.1%, which is where you push the boss. But if he starts casting the mechanic, still need to make sure you make it through the mechanic before you actually go into phase 2. There are more mechanics behind this, or like after this mechanic goes off, but there is nothing new that I can remember on top of my head. So I do believe that these are all of the mechanics that are in phase 1. And then of course we have a little cutscene over here that lasts way too long in my opinion. And then we go into phase 2. Again, as I mentioned, this is a checkpoint. So if you want, you can just run into the wall and do reopeners and such when you start this one. I would recommend, right before you pull the boss, to just shield everyone as well, because the first thing he's going to do is the Divide et Impera, which again, double tank buster, so stack your tanks up and everybody spread around. Instead of being individual AoEs, it is going to be cleaves now, so it's a small difference over there. As you can see, everybody gets cleave, but because we had hyper mitigation already up from before we pulled the boss, basically almost nobody takes damage. Primus Terminus Est is going to put these markers on everyone except the 2 tanks, I believe. I do think if people are dead, the tanks can get this as well. Basically, we just run to the edge of the arena and make sure that no one is opposite of you, because if people are opposite of each other, they will cleave each other as well, and you can't take 2 hits. Maybe if you hyper mitigate this one, you can, but it does give a physical vulnerability up, so I would highly doubt that it is possible. Then Tertius Terminus Est will place 3 sets of AoEs on the arena. As you can see, the first one was in the middle, the second one is over here, and also behind me you can see it a tiny bit over here, and then the third set is going to be on the east side of the arena. Very simple how you handle this. This looks very confusing at first, but just run to where the last AoE dropped and then run into where the first AoE dropped. The only thing you do need to pay attention to is how these AoEs are oriented, because this one, for example, in the middle is a plus, so that makes it so that the corner was safe. But if this was a cross, you would actually need to dodge from the side of the arena. So you do need to pay attention to how these are oriented. As you can see, the 2 marker is a plus, for example, but over here on the 1 marker, this is a cross as well. So if we would have to go from the middle to the edge, if we had to run to the 2 marker, we could just run straight to 2. But if we had to go to this side, we would have to run to the edge of the arena. I'm not quite sure if like from the middle to the edge is a thing, but from the edge to the middle is definitely a thing, because I've done about 20 runs of this so far, The one where you run from a corner to the middle or from a middle to the corner is the one that we saw the most often, but every now and then it would happen that we had to run from an edge to the middle as well, although those are very rare compared to the other ones. So do pay attention to how the crosses are oriented, whether or not the corners are going to be safe, or whether or not you need to actually run to an edge or start on the edge. Those are a little bit more rare. Then Emerald Weapon is going to run away and spawn the Black Wolf's image, as well as these little Magitech, I don't even know what you would call these, like airplanes or something. And this will basically be doing your Exa Flare. So the Black Wolf will take bonus damage, by the way, so just put as much damage on this guy as you can. The damage that you do on this will be reflected on Emerald Weapon later. He'll also like just do like a mini attack on one random party member as well. So just make sure that everybody is healed up when you go into this phase, because you don't know who it's going to go on. And then these things will do Exa Flares through the arena. If you don't know what Exa Flares are, basically they are kind of like traveling AoEs, as you can see over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, and this just travels through the arena. You just position yourself in front of a high number. As you can see, I positioned myself in front of 5, next to a lower number, so I'm just going to go from 5 to where the 2-1 goes, because 2 goes off first and then 5 goes off later, and this makes it for a very easy dodge. Right after these Exa Flares are done, there will also be a knockback AoE that deals a lot of damage from the middle of the arena, so just run to where that little cross marker was and get knocked back. If you have a little bit of trouble dodging these Exa Flares, you can also use Surecast or Arm's Length to mitigate the knockback, because of course the knockback, if you end up in the wall, you're going to die because the wall is a one-shot. So if you're not sure that you'll be able to make it back to the middle because of where you were dodging the Exa Flares, you can just use Surecast and then just not care about the knockback at all. Then Emerald Weapon is going to reappear. As you can see, we just did a bunch of damage to it because we did damage to the Black Wolf's image. Optimized Ultima, which is the raid wide, so again, mitigate this as necessary. Another Divide et Impera, so tanks stack up, use cooldowns, everybody else spreads around the boss in their predetermined spread positions. And then we go into another sword mechanic, Tertius Terminus Est. This one will be paired up with a split mechanic. The split mechanic is random, either he'll leave behind the bottom half of the weapon or he will leave behind the top half of the weapon, and then later when he does this again, he'll switch it around. So here he left the bottom half behind, which will cause Expire. This is the same as in the first phase, so run away from this. And now with the sword mechanic, we will also have this red AoE. If the bottom half was left behind, the red AoE will expand and do very high damage. If you stand into it, I believe it's just going to be a one-shot unless you're a tank. If you left the top half behind, this is going to be a knockback, but we'll see that later. So over here, 2 and 3 dropped first, then over here 1 and 4 dropped second, and then the middle dropped last. So we're going to be waiting for this big AoE to expand and explode. Go to the middle, and then we run to 2. I was positioned a little bit too close to the middle, so I'm not going to make it in time to the safe spot. But as you can see, we would have had to dodge from the middle to 2. Do make sure that you're a little bit closer to the safe spot, because these AoEs do go off relatively quickly. After this, another Legio Phantasmatis, which will be spawning our Black Wolf's image. So again, make sure that everybody has full HP for this, because he will target a random player with a damage ability. I do think it only goes off once, so you don't necessarily need to heal after this. So we have exactly the same as before. We have these little airships that will be doing their Exa Flares. We have the other Magitech armor that will do knockback AoE. But this time around we also have these enemies that are going to be doing align AoEs through the arena. These will always spawn on the north side, by the way. So you can always dodge this on the north side. If you're a caster, you can already pre-position for this. And the safe spot for this will either always be on the edge of the arena or one closer. We've never had it that we had to go even closer into the arena. Either the edge or like the A marker side would be far enough away. So this will basically combine the Exa Flares with line AoEs from these guards. You want to position yourself where there is kind of like a gap in the lines. As you can see, this time around it's over here. And we're going to move one to the right and one to the right again. I do believe it's always going to be next to each other. So you either move double right double left or like right, left, right or something like that. You'll never have to run to the other edge of the arena. So after you dodge all these things, make sure you also dodge the Exa flares that are going on, move towards the middle, make sure that everybody's healed up if they got hit by the Exa flares or by the gunmen, because this will deal raid-wide damage. And then of course, if you can't make it to the middle in time, knockback prevention will work on it, so you can use it over there as well to cheese it. This time around, Secundus Terminus Est will place either a plus marker or a cross marker on players. If you have a cross, you want to put yourself on the cardinals, so A, B, C, D, north, east, south, west. If you have a plus, you want to put yourself on the corners of the map. You don't need to run all the way to the corner. As you can see, you can just sort of stand over here as well. These AoEs are bigger than their line indication, so you might want to walk all the way into the middle of the map if players do decide to drop them close to the boss. But you definitely don't need to run away from melee range if you are a melee DPS. Another sword mechanic with split, this time around because he left the bottom half behind before. He's gonna leave behind the top half this time. This will cause side scathe. Basically, where he is glowing is going to be unsafe, so just move to the other side of the arena. He's gonna place his swords as well as do the knockback, which will originate from this thing. In the beginning, I would always save my surecast for this because you can surecast the knockback later on in the second half of our 20 clears. It was just a lot of fun to just get knocked back into the safe spot and use my surecast on the Black Wolf mechanic. So again, move to the safe spot. This time around there was 2, and then we move into the middle, which was our next safe spot, because that was where our first AoE was originating from. Another Primus Terminus Est, so place yourself on the edges of the arena, but we end up killing the boss over here. Again, this is definitely not where the Enrage is at already, but I do not believe that there are any new mechanics. So all of the mechanics that we've seen so far will be repeating a little bit until you get to the Enrage. But as I mentioned, we do end up killing the boss over here. So that's gonna do it for the Emerald Weapon walkthrough. If you have any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below and I'll definitely get back to you. But on that note, I want to thank you for watching, I want to thank my Patreons for supporting me, and I'll see you in the next one.